Hey everyone, Stakey here. Thanks once again so much for all your support. I really appreciate every single comment and like and view and subscription that comes through with each video I post. I'm having so much fun with this, guys, and I'm glad you guys are enjoying it too. Once again, do not forget to go and check out the original author. All her links will be in the description down below. She deserves all the praise because she's the one who's allowed me to do this project. And lastly, next week there will be no chapter 7. Although I am working on it, I don't think I'll be able to finish editing it in time because I do have classes starting up and I am currently job hunting. So I want to kind of take next week to kind of settle into my classes and see if I can find work. So I'm going to be busy doing that, but there will be a video on Friday. It's going to be a one-shot. I've already asked the author permission to read the story out loud. Thankfully, she did give me permission. So that's what's going to be up tomorrow. On Friday for next week. And then the week after, we will resume Be Still Just For Me, Chapter 7. So I hope you guys are okay with that. And once again, thank you so much for all your support. It means the world to me. And enjoy chapter 6. Wrapped up like a cocooned butterfly waiting to hatch and greet the day, warm sunlight cast a glow on your back as you dug yourself deeper into the comfort of whatever protected you from waking up. Something felt off, but you couldn't quite place it in the haze of sleep. Sleep. You just wanted to sleep.
おい、起きて。
A loud voice made you jump, but instead of tossing off the warmth, you brought your knees to your face and curled up to will the sound away. No, you said, muffled against the blanket pulled over your head. Something hard was shoved against your ear, and a reverberated in your eardrum. Fuck, fine, stop smacking me in the head! You shot your arm out from under the blanket like an iguana tongue searching for a fly, snatching your phone from whoever. Oh, shit, Bakugou? Wait, why is he in my room? What day is it? Alarm. Oh, fuck. Emerging from the blanket with a sudden and fearful burst of energy, you saw Bakugou standing at the end of your bed with crossed arms, an air of annoyance cascading off him like steam, looking down at your phone. Your eyes almost bugged out of your head. You'd slept through all of your alarms to the point where, if you didn't leave in 15 minutes, you'd be late for work. Oh my god, shit, fuck, get out, I gotta get ready! Stumbling off the bed, you shoved Bakugou back out of your room, ignoring his vocal protests and slamming the door in his face. I can't believe this. Oh, don't even have time for a shower! While tossing on some work clothes, you saw your novel discarded on the ground and a zipped baggie of water laying on your bed, prompting you to remember falling asleep while reading with ice on your back. Where'd the blanket come from, though? It normally remained in the corner of your room until the weather got colder. Must have grabbed it in my sleep or something, you reasoned while buttoning up your shirt. After getting dressed, you flew out of your room and into the bathroom, ignoring Bakugou laying on the couch after having been woken up by an unending phone alarm. Wash face, brush teeth, comb hair. No time for makeup. Guess I'll be a mess today. At least I don't work with customers or anything. Opening up the bathroom door, you finally noticed Bakugou in your rush to get ready. Gomen, sorry, you apologized, feeling guilty for waking him up and rushing out like a tornado flying through your apartment. You opened up your purse and tossed some cash onto the counter, turning back to him. Here's some money if you need it. Be back tonight. Without your phone out, he probably didn't understand, but the meaning was hopefully obvious. After you locked the front door, you jogged down the hallway and out into the crisp morning air, too panicked to consider the faster option of driving to work. Now alone in the silent apartment after that mildly entertaining display of you running around like a headless chicken, Bakugou groaned and sunk back down into the couch. He didn't sleep well, tossing and turning, unable to completely relax. Something tugged at the back of his mind. Whether a reminder or memory or revelation, he wasn't sure, preventing him from resting properly. Or maybe it was just your cheap couch. Fuck, he missed his bed, his sheets, his pillows, the familiar smell of his apartment, but there was no use dwelling on something he couldn't immediately change. Either way, Bakugou closed his eyes and attempted to sleep a bit more before dealing with the day. He'd been here almost a full week, and there was fuck all he could do about it. No leads, no clues, nothing. At this point, he tried to desperately avoid any depressing ideas on when, not if, when, he'd return home.
Don't fucking think about it,
he mumbled to himself, honing in on the chirping birds outside to distract him from a worst-case scenario. While Bakugou slept, you nearly jogged all the way to work, slowing down only when you neared the building to avoid appearing too disheveled. In the elevator, you pulled out a mirror to fix your hair, but honestly, there was nothing you could do until you were back home to take a proper shower.
Ah, good morning.
A voice to the left of the open elevator doors greeted when you stepped out onto your floor. You made it just in time to avoid being written up.
Not sick, are you? Make sure you're getting proper rest now,
he commented while scrutinizing your appearance. He was your boss, the fat cat who signed your paychecks. Misogynistic comments were, unfortunately, the norm every once in a while. He definitely came off as a guy who, whenever he saw a bare-faced woman without makeup, assumed she was ill as though women couldn't have under-eye circles or wrinkles. Restraining yourself from tipping his coffee cup down his shirt was difficult. Yes, sir, you answered in a curt but controlled voice, passing by him to sit at your desk and cool down. You thought of the iconic orange cat in the newspaper comic strips, his tired eyes staring right into your soul. Mondays, huh? Fuck 'em. Luckily, you kept some mascara in your purse and slapped some on in the bathroom on your floor to help you look a bit more awake. A mandatory meeting was scheduled for your department soon, and you'd much rather have people focused on your ideas and not how disheveled they thought you looked. A man who latched onto the last bit of hair strands on his head with combed-over desperation stood at the front of the meeting room in front of the heads of your department, yourself included.
So, now that we've been over the scope of the project coming up, does anyone have any idea on how we can tackle some of the foreseeable issues?
He almost always honed right in on possible obstacles, hoping to show the efficiency of his department by catching problems before they arose. A man next to you cleared his throat before speaking.
Yes, I think I know.
He always tried to answer first, but rarely put forward anything innovative or noteworthy. The two of you also didn't get along very well, but you were civil enough to get work done. His answer was predictably predictable. You'd run into a similar problem in the past and knew there was a better way to overcome it.
Fine, not bad,
the balding man at the front of the room replied.
Yes. You have something?
Yes, sir. Moving forward, you explained your idea to combat one of the issues without driveling on with too much detail. A couple of other people nodded, though your coworker who previously spoke remained noticeably still aside from the scratching of his pen on a ruled pad of paper. Your boss acknowledged your idea with a nod before moving on to the next point on the meeting agenda. At least you put the idea forward. Whether or not he went with your concept was anyone's guess. There existed, unfortunately, a definite power hierarchy and culture within the office that favored friends over those who worked the hardest. At least a few times in the past, you were passed over in favor of someone who grabbed after-work beers with a boss or some other kiss-ass style gesture. You wanted to be recognized for your ideas and work, not because you were buddy-buddy with a guy who signed your paychecks. So far, things weren't looking positive on that front, but you tried to remain optimistic. Later in the day, the old computer screen at your desk flickered for a moment, prompting you to look outside and see a sudden sprinkling of rain touching down from the darkening sky. Shit, you mumbled in frustration. Attempting to stay on top of things, you normally checked the weather before work to know if anything would make walking home terrible, in which case you'd tolerate driving. According to the weather app on your phone, it was going to rain all through the night with severe thunderstorms. With no car or umbrella here, you'd get soaked on the way home, but there was nothing you could do about it. With a sigh, you said, I hope Bakugo's out of the rain. While the rhythm of the rain loomed on the horizon at your office, Bakugo stretched out on the grass in the park near your apartment he'd found before the weekend. Red eyes looked up at the distant roll of thunder, but ultimately he decided to continue exercising rather than head back to your apartment. He'd dealt with much worse than a little rain in the past. However, Bakugo apparently waited a bit too long to run back to safety. Now completely soaked from his hair to his shoes, the only pair of shoes he had here, he stood under the awning of a building nearby, hoping the rain might slow down soon since he was a good 10-minute walk from your apartment building. Bakugo hummed to himself in annoyance while gazing up at the dark clouds, lightning accompanying the boom of thunder over the city. He wondered where he'd be right now if you'd kicked him out for one reason or another. Could he find adequate shelter from the rain? What if he caught a cold with no ability to buy medicine or see a doctor? What if he had none of the comforts you'd freely given him? Damn it. He ran a wet hand over his wet face, the foggy headlights of cars speeding past enough to nearly drench him again from splashing puddles. He loathed feeling indebted to someone, but literally had no way of paying you back other than, what, cooking? Not acting like an ass? He watched the rain pour down, and rather than wait for it to let up for him to make an escape, it only barreled down in harder and more forceful sheets. It looked as though he'd have to make a run for it at this rate, not like he could get any wetter than he already was. Meanwhile, you'd just arrived home after sprinting as best you could from your office building through the puddles and wind. Your clothes were soaked, you were freezing, and all you wanted to do was get inside to feel warm and dry. Today has not been my day, huh? You wrung out your hair and shirt as best you could and took off your shoes to avoid tracking in too much water, then slid the key into the lock of your apartment door and walked inside. It immediately felt empty. Bakugo? You called out, but no one answered. You listened for the shower, but aside from your clothes dripping onto the floor and the obvious patter of the rain outside, the apartment was silent. Fuck it. Rather than track water everywhere, you quickly stripped down right in front of the door, double-checking that you locked it just in case, and gathered your clothes up into your arms to drop into the washing machine by the bathroom, before hopping into your room for some clean, dry clothes. After having an unexpected guest for nearly a week, walking around your apartment without clothes and without fear of being seen felt nice, but it would only last until Bakugou returned. Much better. You sighed, while straightening the oversized shirt and mismatched pants. They were pajamas, so who cared if they went together? Wait, so if he's not here, then... Shit, I hope he at least found some shelter until it hopefully lets up. You opened up the closet door in the front hallway to see your umbrella. It seemed as though neither of you prepared for today, but Bakugou probably didn't even know it was there. Hot tea sounds nice right now. As you walked into the kitchen to start boiling some water, you saw a note scribbled on the counter.
Walk. Back later.
You stared at the note, written in surprisingly neat letters in your native language. He'd surely start a fight before he'd let you criticize his handwriting again, and realized that Bakugou was considerate enough to let you know he went out. Surprisingly thoughtful. Must have used the dictionary. You commented while smiling to yourself. While a kettle of water boiled on the stove, you set about mopping up some of the water on the floor before setting out a clean, dry towel for whenever Bakugou got back. Tea first, then shower, you thought. With a warm mug in your hands and a steeping tea bag floating against the steam, you sat down right before the front door opened. In walked Bakugou, dripping from head to shoes as if he'd jump into a pool with his clothes on. The black tank top he wore stuck to the contours of his skin like glue. His pale blonde hair plastered to his forehead, and every inch of exposed skin glistened under the yellow-tinted hallway light. Pushing down the blush that rose to your face hot and fast proved impossible, unfortunately. He seemed startled to find you sitting there for whatever reason, but to avoid staring at him and to also distract yourself, nearly choking on your tea in the process, you grabbed your phone and basically threw the towel at him, hitting him in the face. Sorry, I made some tea if you want any. You can toss your wet clothes in the washer. Guess we both got caught in the rain. You joked while attempting to get a hold of yourself. Maybe it was the heat of your blush gathering on the back of your neck, the humidity rolling off Bakugou like the steam from your tea, or something else unknown because the room felt like a sauna as you cleared your throat awkwardly. He grunted and roughly towel-dried his hair before emerging like a wet cat. You put your discomfort on pause to hold in a laugh.
Where's the washer?
He asked. You pointed towards the narrow door next to the bathroom. Bakugou followed your finger with his crimson eyes before slipping off his shoes and socks at the door. He dried himself off as best he could and walked to the bathroom with an armful of dry clothes. Bakugou tossed his dripping clothes into the bathroom sink before setting down a towel to keep from making even more of a mess.
Fucking rain.
He cursed as he turned the shower head to the hottest setting, hoping to erase the chill under his skin. He'd lost track of time after getting stranded under a shop awning and didn't expect you to be back from work, the dark sky outside messing with his sense of time without a phone or watch. Although he normally disliked getting a constant barrage of texts and calls and emails due to his status as a top hero, Bakugou did miss his own technology and the convenient ability to stay connected. He'd considered blowing off Kaminari's drinking invitation before he disappeared, but now thought of every time he'd skipped out on being with his friends in favor of taking an extra patrol shift or training. What if he never...
No, don't consider it. I'll be back home. No fucking doubt about it.
He echoed the words into the tiled and foggy shower wall as hot water eased his cold muscles back to life. If people called him stubborn and someone who refused to give up, he would make sure to live up to the titles. With Bakugou out of sight, you let out a shaky breath and took a sip of tea to calm yourself. He's so hot, you whispered to yourself until you realized he'd left a wet trail of rainwater all the way across the floor. You debated making him clean it up when he got out, but figured making a big deal out of it when he already looked miserable from the rain, or possibly slipping on a puddle and busting your ass on the floor when your bruise from yesterday was healing, might not go over well. Once your floor was dry once again, you sorted through the fridge to find something warm to cook for dinner. The items Bakugou picked out at the store were diminishing while items you preferred sat mostly untouched. So you grabbed some ground beef, picked out some spices from the cabinet, and got to work seasoning and prepping a couple of hamburgers. You weren't even sure if he was hungry, but you sure felt your stomach rumble, so too bad. It'll be my lunch tomorrow if he doesn't want it, you decided while chopping up a jalapeno to mix in with Bakugou's burger while yours remained milder. Just before you placed the burgers in the hot pan, the bathroom door opened. You turned around to see Bakugou drop his wet clothes into the washer, where you just remembered your own clothes sat unwashed. Holding back a gasp of horror, you turned back to the food, desperately trying to push away the idea of his own clothes mingling with yours. This is how I die, huh? You mumbled, another blush heating your face and neck. It was such a stupid thing to stress over, really, but with each passing day, you felt more and more attracted to your temporary roommate. Bakugou felt far better after a hot shower. The warmth cleared his head and shoved away the bleak thoughts for the moment. He was running out of clean clothes anyway, so washing this small load would help him out a bit. If he needed to, he'd ask how to use the washer and dryer to wash the rest of his things. Emphasis on if he needed to. The sound of oil sizzling in a pan pulled his attention towards the kitchen. Whatever you were making honestly didn't smell too bad, and coming from Bakugou, that was a high compliment. He walked next to you and silently pulled out an empty mug since you mentioned tea earlier, and filled the vessel with steaming water from the kettle.
What kinds of tea do you have?
The phone next to you on the counter translated. It was only then he noticed how stiff and tense you looked while at the stove, almost as if touching you might shatter the brittle support keeping you upright and hyper-focused on the cooking meat. Green, Earl Grey, and black tea. They're in the pantry. Bakugou could determine which tea was which by smell, and the color of the box, since he couldn't read the text, preferring green tea over the others. While it steeped in his mug, Bakugou stood behind you, leaning against the counter with his arms crossed, eyes focused on you and the stove.
Don't burn 'em.
He joked, to break the awkward silence, but it only seemed to pull your shoulders in even more. He wondered if something happened today to put you in this oddly quiet mood. You were normally talkative and curious, or at least responsive, especially considering he pretty much had no one else to talk to. He didn't realize how intently he was staring at every movement you made. The only thing that brought Bakugou out of his trance was your sudden yelp and hiss when some oil splashed up on your hand after flipping the burgers. The fuck were you standing so close to the stove for? Ow, shit! You shook your hand but didn't recoil completely from the stove. Too stubborn for your own good, he observed.
Let me do it. Heat doesn't bother me.
He offered without thinking too much about it. Because of his quirk, only extreme heat affected his hands and arms, which proved convenient for cooking with hot oil or anything that might pop up and burn him. Rather than move away, though, you stood your ground. I'm fine, you answered with more force than he was expecting. You sighed before following it up with, I'm fine. Nothing I can't handle. I've dealt with worse. Besides, it's almost done, so not much for you to do anyway. He was tempted to just pull you away from the stove. You were clumsy, but didn't seem particularly delicate. Your resilience with putting up with him was proof of that. Shoving you out of the way while hovering over hot oil with intense concentration might not be the best idea, though. Under any other circumstance, Bakugou might have been pissed with the tone, but he could tell you weren't acting like yourself. At least, this wasn't the you he was used to. He'd only known and observed you for a week, but you were nothing if not consistent so far.
What's with the attitude? Did something happen today?
His curious question brought you out of your trance, not expecting him to ask what was wrong. How could you possibly tell him that he was the distraction causing your spike in stress? You'd rather have the ground open up and swallow you whole than admit the truth. So you decided to be honest while leaving out anything concerning him. It's just not been a great day, I guess. Waking up late and getting to work tired. My boss was being a dick, running home in the rain. Things just added up, I guess. Sorry if I was being a brat. After turning off the heat and plating the burgers, you turned, unsure of what Bakugou's silence meant. His arms were crossed and his brows were furrowed, making you wonder whether or not he accepted your apology.
The hell are you apologizing for? Shit happens. Just turn off your stupid alarm next time.
It was such a Bakugou thing to say. Simple, direct, and with a slight demand sprinkled in. Sometimes, you could predict Bakugou's answers and behavior based on your secret knowledge, and other times he surprised you. There really was a lot more to learn about him, and you covertly hoped he'd continue opening up little by little. Whenever you were around him, you couldn't help but try to smile a bit. Thanks, and I'll try, you answered with a small laugh. Bakugou just rolled his eyes and stood beside you to take some clean plates. He started to reach for one of the burgers, but you stopped him. No, take that one, you said, pointing to the other. I made it spicy. Your intense focus over feeling stressed luckily ensured you didn't forget which burger was which. He raised an eyebrow before taking the burger you pointed at and followed you to the table with his tea. Rain continued to pelt the windows and roof outside, but your attention was focused on Bakugou's reaction to your cooking. He examined the burger with exaggerated scrutiny, eyeing you with a knowing smirk, before taking an experimental bite. Then another, and another. You smiled at his silent acknowledgement of how good the burger tasted, knowing his compliments, especially on food, were probably rare. You took a bite of your own burger, and your pride at something so small soared. Yeah, it was a pretty damn good burger. Banter was short and sparse as the two of you enjoyed warm food in an attempt to banish the slight chill in the air. All it took was Bakugou validating your mood to make you feel better. Even though he was in a far worse situation than you'd ever dealt with, you felt grateful for his attempt to avoid stoking the flames of annoyance. When the two of you were done eating, Bakugou stood up and grabbed your plate with a glare that dared you to fight him.
I'll wash. Don't argue.
You held up your hands in mock defeat, prompting him to shake his head at your antics. If Bakugou wanted to act domestic, you weren't about to stop him. Too bad you didn't own an apron. While Bakugou washed the dishes, you got up to finally start the washer where two different sets of clothes mingled. Luckily, everything looked dark and indiscernible as you blocked the hallway light and poured detergent in before closing the door and starting the machine. Once things were dry, though, you had no idea how to deal with sorting his things from yours, so to distract yourself, you decided it was finally time for a hot shower. "I'm gonna take a shower," you said while holding up your phone and pointing towards the bathroom. There was a nearly imperceptible hesitation before Bakugou nodded while standing at the sink, eyes down and focused on the running water. Maybe it took him a second to understand? You weren't sure, but instead of dwelling on something that was probably nothing, you shrugged and disappeared into the bathroom. Bakugou's calloused hands kept busy on the scalding water, rinsing over the dirty plate when he heard it again. You're singing. He silently wondered if you'd do it again the first time he heard you sing a few days ago. Unconsciously, he turned off the water and listened. Whenever he kept himself busy alone in your apartment, things almost always felt too quiet. His quirk was loud, his voice was loud, and his general attitude mirrored both, so silence often buzzed in his ears like static. It wasn't necessarily that he disliked a lack of noise, but it all came down to choosing silence rather than it being the default. So when you began to sing, he enjoyed it, not that he'd ever admit so out loud. He didn't realize how long he'd been standing still until you stopped singing, blinking himself back to attention so you wouldn't wonder why the hell it took him 10 minutes to wash a few plates. Once the hairdryer started up and the dishes were dry, Bakugou walked across the living room to peer out into the stormy darkness outside. Thunder echoed off in the distance, the occasional flash of lightning casting a glow over the city horizon. He hated the rain, because it forced a chill into his bones, and he far preferred feeling warm over feeling cold. However, the sound and aesthetics often calmed him, reminding him in some small measure of his quirk. He created light in dark places on both large and small scales like flashes of lightning. His quirk was loud and vibrated the eardrums of those not used to the reverberations like thunder. Some found beauty and comfort in the power of his quirk and scale, at which he could create controlled explosions, while others cowered in fear. His eyes remained focused on the storm outside when the bathroom door opened. He felt your eyes on him, and saw your reflection in the dark window, but only turned around when he heard the click of a lighter. Figured I had prepared just in case," you said with the phone next to you, and a candle in one hand and a lighter in the other. Glad that you'd managed to relax while eating dinner, he said nothing when he noticed tension once again sat in your shoulders like an invisible weight. If something else was bothering you, he could shut up and listen to you vent for a minute or two.
Is that the one you bought after I got here?
You nodded, adding, "Yeah, I almost forgot I picked it up." As the wick burned down, the smell of the scented wax hit his nose.
Doesn't smell terrible,
he commented, in an attempt to ease your second wave of tension. It wasn't a lie. He liked the smell, which honestly surprised him. You pursed your lips and rolled your eyes. "No, if it did, I wouldn't have bought it," you quipped back. He opened his mouth to retort, when the light suddenly flickered before a massive crack of thunder plunged the two of you into darkness. Being abruptly tossed into a dark apartment, coupled with the whistling wind and drum-like thunder, made you yelp. Too caught up in trying to think of what to do now, you weren't embarrassed to feel grateful for Bakugou's presence at that moment. "More candles, light," you mumbled, trying to remember where you'd put some of your other candles when a warm glow brought your attention to your left. Bakugou stood with his palm up, activating his quirk just enough to illuminate his hand, but not enough to let off more than a few small sparks. His other hand came up to point to the candle and gesture around the apartment, and you understood. He followed you around the apartment while you looked for a few more candles hiding in closets and cabinets. As you dug around in a small toolbox your parents gifted you when you moved into this apartment, you remembered that your phone had a flashlight on it. But of course, you weren't about to replace human flashlight Bakugou with your phone. You pulled out a dusty, small emergency flashlight with batteries that definitely needed to be changed soon, judging by the dim light emitting from the lens. After lighting all of the candles you had found, you grabbed the dictionary you bought the previous day. Running down your phone's battery without the ability to recharge it wasn't the smartest idea. The dictionary would be difficult for longer sentences, but you felt very appreciative for buying it on a gut reaction. It wasn't much light, but it'd have to do until they came back on, which you hoped was soon. Arigato, you said while looking up at Bakugou. The glow from the candles and his quirk made his eyes look like sparkling gems in the darkness, like rubies hiding in a forgotten cave just waiting to be unearthed by someone with enough dedicated patience. You hoped immensely that he couldn't tell how often you were staring. He shook his head and corrected your pronunciation once again, but there was only so much you could do about your lack of Japanese accent. A particularly loud crack of thunder outside made you yelp again, wishing there was something to help drown out the sound. Bakugou grabbed the dictionary from you and flipped through it.
Scared?
He asked with a smirk. While you butchered his language, Bakugou's accent only made his words more appealing. You'd rather eat soap than let him act smug, so you crossed your arms and stared at him with determination. Nope. However, yet another boom shook the windows, the worst one so far, and effectively erased the remainder of your resolve. He considered poking fun at how scared you were from something as normal as a storm, but actually seeing the anxiety rise off you in waves kept him silent. Bakugou could be an asshole, but he wasn't about to make you feel bad on purpose, especially considering the shitty day you described to him earlier. Comparing bad moods, his own shitty situation didn't invalidate the problems in your own life. Lightning lit up the room when you grabbed a candle, moved around him, and sat down on the couch he'd been using as a bed and wrapped the blanket he'd also been using around your shoulders up to your ears. He wasn't sure how he felt about you using his blanket. Well, technically yours, but yanking it away wouldn't be productive. You loved roller coasters, but hated storms? As tough as you presented yourself, everyone had a weakness, it seemed. Bakugou grabbed the dictionary and sat down on the opposite end of the couch, flipping through the thin pages. Without your phone, conversation was limited, but he felt an urge to try and distract you somehow. Comforting people had never been part of his hero repertoire. Bakugou's focus remained on winning and saving, preferring to leave the responsibility of consoling people to others better suited for that emotional labor. That patience was something he lacked, but Bakugou didn't see it as a necessity for doing hero work. The knowledge that came more naturally to Deku and Kirishima and Uraraka might have come in handy right now though, seeing you huddled up on the couch. Remaining quiet as rain pelted and rattled the windows made him feel unusually awkward, but he had no idea what the hell kind of limited conversation he could distract you with. Until his eyes, now used to the darkness, saw something under your TV sitting on a shelf. This could go nowhere, or it could start a full-blown argument as it had done between his friends back home. Better than nothing, though.
Oi,
he said, catching your attention. You turned to him, the blanket still wrapped halfway up your head. What?
Iron Man or Captain America?
Maybe his accent threw you off, but if you had a brain and critical thinking skills, which Bakugou knew you possessed, you could figure it out. And honestly, he hoped for a bit of a fight, or else he'd have to come up with something else. Bakugou held some kind of humor in his eyes, which momentarily distracted you from the storm. Captain America, you answered. Immediately, his eye twitched in the dim candlelight. You actually liked both Iron Man and Captain America, but you remembered a collab event with Marvel when one of the movies came out and Deku chose Captain America while Bakugou chose Iron Man. You wanted to see if this information held true.
No, Iron Man,
he argued with mock exhaustion and renewed energy. You grabbed the dictionary from him and flipped through it to counter his answer. anata wa kurute iru. As soon as the words left your mouth, you watched his jaw go slack and stare at you as though you'd grown a second head. You'd insulted him in joking ways before, so why did it look as though his brain was backfiring? Did you say it wrong? You just repeated what the dictionary said. Chigau! Bakugou exclaimed as he snapped back to attention, wrenching the dictionary away from you. You'd heard the term enough in anime you'd watched to know roughly what it meant, and assumed he was arguing about your character choice. Captain America is better! Tossing your hands up, the storm and your fear lay forgotten as your focus shifted to the argument at hand. When Bakugou found the page he was looking for, he held the dictionary up to you even though you could barely read the text in the dim light without holding it right up to your face.
Nemu, not anata wa.
He emphasized with a growl while pointing to himself. You furrowed your brows, not understanding what you did wrong. So, Bakugou, not anata wa? You asked, hoping for clarification. He nodded before you took the dictionary back from him. Wakarimasen. Bakugou ran a hand through his hair in obvious frustration. Maybe the term you used was really rude. The dictionary should have pointed that out then. He looked around before finding a pen and grabbing the book back from you, nearly giving you a paper cut in the process. Watch it! I could have just asked for it. He flipped back to a specific page and vigorously scribbled out anata wa while writing no next to it before shoving it back in your face. You'd seen several different sides of Bakugou at this point, but this particularly frustrated attitude seemed new. When the power came back on, you'd have to ask him what the hell his problem was. Unfortunately, before that happened, another crack of thunder rattled the windows. Rather than sink back into the couch, you bolted up and nearly tripped on the blanket wrapped around you in the process. Maybe moving around or searching for something to occupy your time and mind without any power remained your only option. Bakugou watched as you fumbled across the room to grab the dying flashlight, mumbling to yourself before walking into your room. Apparently, he'd done a shitty job of keeping you distracted when a Captain America versus Iron Man debate spiraled into a vocabulary lesson.
Oi, nani o shiteiru no?
He called out from the couch, watching the flashlight bounce back and forth in your room like a frazzled lightning bug. You crawled under the bed, shifted to the closet, and walked across where he couldn't see before. Finally, every light in the apartment flipped back on like a blinding sun. And ow! In your room told Bakugou it startled you as well. After sitting in the dark, the light hurt his eyes until he adjusted and could see properly once more. The rain and thunder still echoed outside, but at least the two of you had light and electricity. Oh, thank fuck. You mumbled as your anxiety started to subside with the renewal of power. Now where's my phone? After adapting to the bright light in your room, you walked out to see Bakugou standing up from the couch to stretch. It took extreme willpower to tear your eyes away from the muscles in his arms and back as you walked into the kitchen to grab your phone. He walked towards you, and now that you could see him in the light, Bakugou looked almost flustered? But that couldn't be right. Maybe you were just seeing what you wanted to see, just imagining things.
So why the hell are you afraid of storms?
Bakugou asked with his arms crossed as he leaned against the kitchen counter, as if guarding himself from something. You groaned, knowing your stress over the thunder and lightning was anything but subtle. No point in lying, I guess. I used to like storms when I was little, but one day I was a smartass and didn't go inside when my mom yelled at me when it started to rain. A lightning bolt struck pretty close by and I went deaf for a minute or two, which would freak out most kids, I think. So I just don't like it now. Laying out that story to him felt odd, but you were only human and kids did dumb shit all the time. It luckily hadn't permanently affected your hearing, but the presence of lightning and thunder recalled that vivid memory of raw fear every single time. Bakugou stood still, staring at you, before speaking.
You probably wouldn't like Kaminari then.
You weren't sure if this was his attempt at a joke, but even if it wasn't, you appreciated it. Is that Pikachu? You asked, careful about not letting him know your memory was full of information Bakugou hadn't revealed. He nodded, and you swore a glimmer of nostalgia brightened in his eyes before disappearing.
His quirk is more like electricity than lightning. Would be handy during a power outage. Stick a cord in his mouth and he'll charge your shit.
The fact that Kaminari actually charged things for his friends made you laugh at the ridiculousness of it. Wow. Yeah, that is handy. I hope he only sticks clean things in his mouth, though. No one I know sanitizes power cords. At that, Bakugou barked out a laugh of his own, and you couldn't help but smile. It felt like earning a badge of honor to get Bakugou to smile or laugh.
He's way too dumb to think far ahead enough to consider germs.
The two of you settled into silence once more, before you decided on a risky comment. I can tell you care about your friends. I'm sure they miss you, but you'll see them again soon. I don't know anything for certain, and I wish I could help more. But if they're heroes like you, then they'll figure it out and get you back to where you belong. Bakugou stared at you with intensity, and for a moment you thought you'd overstepped boundaries once again by bringing up his situation, until he blinked, and the tension in his shoulder eased ever so slightly.
Of course they are. They'd be lost without me, and no one can take my place.
His confident grin made you forget all about the storm outside before he walked off into the bathroom and closed the door. It was at that moment you noticed the washer and dryer and remembered you needed to dry both his and your clothes so they wouldn't start to smell. Quickly, you slid over to the stacked machine and opened up the dryer, tossing a few scented dryer sheets into the metal bin before digging into the washer. I'm touching Bakugou's things, his clothes. Don't be weird, don't make it weird. Something orange caught your eye though, and you remembered that neither of you wore orange since he left his hoodie here today. They were a pair of black boxer briefs with a bright orange band. Grenades, explosions, and red X's ran across the band in a repeating pattern. You currently held Bakugou's underwear in your hands, and if you weren't frozen in place, you'd probably rip the fabric with how tightly your fingers dug into the damp elastic. Oh, nope, no. Your jaw clenched so hard you swore you almost chipped a tooth before you shut your eyes and tossed everything else into the dryer, slamming the door shut just as Bakugou came out of the bathroom behind you. Bakugou wore boxer briefs, with his own branding on them, because why wouldn't he do that? Your face felt hot and a bead of sweat definitely ran down the back of your neck when you quickly pressed the button to start the dryer as Bakugou walked somewhere behind you. The storm outside sounded farther away and less aggressive when Bakugou walked into the living room and saw you standing in front of the washer and dryer in silence, a beep emanating from the stacked machines.
You okay?
He asked, mildly concerned over why you were just standing there like a statue. Apparently that jolted you out of whatever trance you were in, because you nearly jumped when he spoke. Was the storm bugging you again despite the lights being back on? He watched you scoot, across the floor and grab your phone. Well, it's late, so, a good night, Bakugou. You walked backwards, nearly tripping over the couch in the process, before making it to your room and closing the door. Staring after you, Bakugou looked at the running dryer and thought he should have asked you how to use it so he could wash his own things. You weren't his maid, so he wasn't about to have you do chores on his behalf. Your inclination to help him without Bakugou even asking for help threw him off day after day. He couldn't find any malice in your actions, but he was nothing if not self-sufficient. You already gave him shelter, food, clothes, company. As much as he hated to admit it, Bakugou just assumed he was going to wake up here again tomorrow. What choice did he have other than just wait until those idiots back home figured it out? Bakugou stood by the tall window overlooking the parking lot in front of the building and watched the rain come down in sheets, coating the cars and asphalt with a slick, wet shine. The pale yellow street lamps outside cast a glow on Bakugou's face as the dark silhouettes of raindrops slopping down the glass outside mirrored moving shadows across the contours of his cheeks and hollow of his eyes. Despite the slight chill in the air and sense of isolation Bakugou currently felt wriggle under his skin, he glanced at your closed bedroom door briefly and felt warm. There existed, unfortunately, a definite higher power hierarchy. Power hierarchy. Knowing his compliments, especially, his quirk was loud and vibrated the eardrums of those not used to the reverberation. Oh my god. Reverberations. Good golly. But not enough to let off more than a few small sparks.
Rude?
Like rubings? No. But Bakugou didn't see it as a necessity.